Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So we are in the post State of the Union morning, and I just heard from you the disturbing news that you did not watch. How could you not
I
watch?
crawled in bed with Pat Buchanan last night instead, Bill. I'm
Oh my God,
reading.
it makes it even worse.
Well, I was afraid you were afraid that I've been listening to too many left wing podcasts, so I had to make up for it. So I've been reading Right from the Beginning, which is his autobiography. I think written I think it was written like around 1990, something like that. But I'm telling you, man, it's a great read and super interesting. Like he had so many brushes with the law. For example, he must have been arrested numerous times, and these brawls, these fist fights he would be involved in. It is just a crazy. Like one time he got arrested, and they had the police changed shifts, I guess, while they were processing them, and he pretended that he had just showed up, and he's like, "Why are you holding these men?" And he's like, "These are my friends. I heard that they were, arrested. I'm coming down here to get them out." And then the police are like, "Listen, unless you need to either you get out of here or you're going to be with them." And Pat's like, "Okay, I've done my," like turns around and leaves. Another story, Bill, is where he and his brothers, he has got like 8 siblings or something, but he's got these 2 older brothers, and they managed to get invited to this like debutante ball, and they got basically plastered, and the one brother passed out, and they didn't want to make a scene, so Pat and his other brother had to literally drag him out of the basement through the woods, like over a fence to their car, and then they left him in the car and went back to the party. I had no idea. So, Bill, instead of watching the State of the Union, which I knew, most years, I would say I am forced to watch this horrific show and document it and write a column about it. I had a better night, but I will assure you, I've been up now for 4 hours and watched 2 hours of Morning Joe and listened to 2 hours of conservative talk radio. So I've got my talking points.
Well, you missed the best one. This is the best State of the Union that I've seen ever since, well, probably ever, number one. And to certainly since I've had to write about State of the Unions. Like, this had the most, you might find once if this person had more oratorical flair, this rose to greater height. But as far as like sheer political theater, this was the best one. And I know the heels of a bunch of takes, pre-speech takes, like, why do we even do the State of the Union? Why can't we go back to when it was a written message? All this phony pomp and circumstance is such a waste of time, and the speechwriters hate it. It's a laundry list of proposals that aren't going to go anywhere. And here comes Biden, like, it's like, WWE, like, let's mix it up.
I know, Bill, but I guess part of my concern is, and by the way, it did, the clips I saw, part of it reminded me of like the prime minister's questions in Great Britain.
Yeah, question time. Yeah, which is good stuff. We should have more question time.
He's talking and they're jeering and booing, and at a certain point, he almost engages them in a bit of a back and forth. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene there wearing her like feathered collar. I don't even know what to describe it. Someone said that, joked on Twitter about how she was going to make a coat out of the dogs that George Santos like stole or something. I don't even know. Someone's
was
it
an actual fur? Was it a purposeful fur coat? Just like I'm the last person to still wear fur.
I don't know. It is a look. It is a look, and then of course, Kirsten Sinema, not to be outdone, looked like she was also going to the Grammys instead of a State of the Union. And I guess that's my point, Bill. The showboating, you mentioned WWE. Even if it is entertaining, does that mean it's does that mean that it's healthy or positive? What happened?
Well, number one, entertaining is good. I'm pro entertaining. Politics should be fun. So I'm all for it.
That's where you and I fundamentally disagree. It's
But
too fun. There's too many people involved. People now it's people see it now as Hollywood or or entertainment, and that's a problem.
well, some people like Ronald Reagan might say the intersection of Hollywood and politics is not a bad thing. um, nevertheless,
The poison is in the dose, is what I would say.
um, but there was substance here. It wasn't just it wasn't the breakdown of civility. I mean, yes, there obviously was jeering and so forth. There was a lack of decorum, but Biden used that substantively. Most notably with the Social Security back and forth, where so Biden says it was interesting to me because I was looking at the pre-written remarks as he was going and sort of and catching where he was ad libbing, which was there was a fair amount of, and this was the second time when he ad libbed after charging Republicans with taking a horrible position, to caveat and say, "Well, I know it's not most of you."
Mm-hmm. Do you think?
So
I know that wasn't in the prepared remarks, but I mean, I suspect that I wouldn't say ad libbed. Maybe don't you think he was?
Maybe a pre-planned ad lib.
Yeah.
I think Reagan actually was a master at that. But regardless, he's saying, there are Republicans that want to sunset Social Security and Medicare, and then the booing starts. He was like, "Well, I know it's not most of you. I'm not even saying it's a majority of you, but come to my office, check out the proposal. I'll show it to you." He's basically referring to Rick Scott's plan.
Yeah.
He didn't name him, but Rick
Scott's not. I mean, Rick Scott is not indicative of everybody, but he's not a backbencher. He's a U.S. senator. He was head of the Republican senatorial campaign committee last cycle. So I think it's fair game to bring that up. Now, what Rick Scott didn't want to, what he wants to do is every 5 years, right? Congress would have to vote to reauthorize
on every law, not specific to Social Security, Medicare, but everything. And so Democrats quickly said, "Well, that obviously includes Social Security, Medicare. You want to send to Social Security, Medicare," and then of course Republicans ran for the hills. So,
and by the way, and Mike Lee's sitting there like, this is ridiculous. Mike Lee has actually said, I don't want to misquote him, but basically that he wants to phase out Social Security or something to that effect in the past. So
right. So amidst all the howling, Biden ad libs. So I guess we all want to take Social Security off the books. We're not going to touch it, right? I'm not getting exact, I'm sure. But everyone applauds. McCarthy's in the back applauding. Now, of course, as some conservatives I'm sure have noted, and I got a piece coming out that I note this so well, McCarthy had already taken off the table. McCarthy had said repeatedly over the past several days, let's take Social Security and Medicare off the table. So in that sense, Biden wasn't pushing something that was all that new for the Republican negotiating position, but McCarthy said it. It wasn't necessarily evident that everybody in the caucus was backing him on that, because other individuals have said things that are different. The Republican Study Committee has a proposed fiscal 2023 budget that calls for privatization and other benefit cuts down for future generations. But he got the whole caucus, at least optically, to cheer taking it off the table. So now it is 100% off the table. And it looks like Biden engineered it. McCarthy doesn't get the credit for it because Biden is seen as orchestrating this real-time negotiation.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, Bill, I think the thing that started the jeering and the booing was when Biden was basically saying that he didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but he basically pointed out that Donald Trump had raised the debt more than anybody. And I think that's a factual point that Biden was making, and that I think that started.
It does lack some context, to be fair to the Republicans. I mean, yes, 25% of the debt is on Trump's watch, but it's because of the pandemic relief that both parties voted for. If you look at federal spending as a share of GDP, it's pretty steady going back to Reagan. When Reagan comes in, it's at about 20% GDP. It pretty much stays around there for all of Reagan. When you get to Clinton, it starts coming down. It goes down to 17% in his last year. And under Bush, it was coming back up to 20, and then the recession hits. Obama takes it to 24 with the Recovery Act, the stimulus, but it comes back down after their budget negotiations. It comes back down to 20. And it's staying around 20 until the pandemic, and then it goes up to 31, which is the biggest it's been since World War II. Now, under Biden, it's coming down some. It's been right now for 2022, it's at 24.6%. So higher than generally it has been, but down off its peak. So Biden is technically correct. All this debt's on Trump's watch. So it's unfair for Republicans to say it's all because of your reckless spending.
And Biden's other point was that Republicans voted to raise the debt limit 3 times during that time. So why now are you? Yeah.
Correct. Which and those are fair points. You could still say, okay, but we should do some spending cuts now and get back to around 20%. But Republicans are a little bit over their skis, saying this is all your fault. And so I think beyond the Social Security jiu-jitsu move, Biden is also not giving Republicans any kind of pre-negotiation concession to start this process. Whereas McCarthy, he did. He conceded Social Security Medicare off the top. That was his kind of olive branch. And Biden's not meeting him in kind at the beginning of the process, which is unusual for a Democratic president in the third year of his presidency. We have the examples of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. They have bad midterms. They're getting hit for budgetary deficits, fairly or unfairly. And they both come into their State of the Unions and say, we got to cut spending. We got to cut the deficit. Obama proposes a spending freeze, which would be an effective cut. Biden pledges to cut $130 billion from the budget in spending. Biden does not do this. There's nothing to say, hey, I know we're going to cut the budget somewhere. We just got to, Obama and Clinton, we got to cut the budget, but lay off of Social Security, Medicare, and food stamps and things like that. There was no kind of strategic retreat to try to save something. Biden is just confident. He's defending his record. He's defending the deficit reduction that he's already made. And he's not giving Republicans an inch off the top. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to give it down the line, but he's starting the negotiation from a position of confidence, which is probably not where people thought Joe Biden might do, considering his approval rating's not great, did lose the House. There's a confidence there that I think I can't say it's going to make a difference in terms of the negotiation, because I think they're going to cut spending at the end of the day. Maybe it'd be huge cuts, but it's not going to be Social Security, but it's going to be something. But as far as shoring up Biden's political position within the party, he already did himself a world of good with the midterm. But then just the past couple of weeks, you have he's still old. And all this poll says that people don't even know his accomplishments. He's losing to Trump by 3 points. Yeah, I don't know. A performance like this makes Democrats think, you know what? The guy still got it.
He definitely seemed energetic. What I saw, it seems like he was lingering. He was in no hurry to leave. He wanted the night to go on. Bill, I would say, having listened to a couple of hours of conservative talk radio this morning, a couple of the pushbacks that I heard, one was fentanyl, how Biden talked about the problem of fentanyl. Republicans blame him for the border crisis as being
Mhm.
a main driver of that problem. And then there was also some criticism that Biden didn't directly talk about China and the balloon, the spy balloon that seems like a million years ago, Bill, but happened
Well,
in between the last times
is it? But isn't that the point? I mean,
you and I
why
talked.
would Biden do a whole balloon section with from Biden's perspective? It was a thing. We took care of it. Let's move on. Um, Republicans seem really. I mean, they seem sort of angry. Why can't we milk this more? Why can't this be a bigger deal? Because they want to make China the thing. Amongst they want expanding the thing and China the thing. I mean, that's what they really want to do.
Well,
And
I mean,
Biden's
I
not
want
letting them.
China. I want China to be a big deal too, because I think it's a real problem. But they want to blame Biden. They want to say that Biden is weak, that this made Biden look weak, and it's just it's not quite. It doesn't quite work. I think there's criticisms you could make of how Biden or the administration handled the spy balloon crisis, but it's not a clear. You don't have a clear shot at him. It wasn't like helicopters going down in a rescue attempt or something. That's going to haunt him. And so, but there, yeah, but anyway, that is what they're saying today. Whether fetch will happen or
Well,
not, I can't say.
I mean that is not going to make Biden shed a tear. That's not that doesn't show that Biden made some kind of misstep that he's made himself vulnerable on that they're going to pound him with now. Republicans are still in a weird place because they still don't have a unified position on the budget. They don't have a negotiating position, and they're not unified on Ukraine, which is the bigger foreign policy challenge, at least in the short term. So they're desperately trying to move to places where they are unified, but they don't have great footholds. And Biden, Biden didn't see a need to turn into the skid in some area where he's weak. He stood his ground basically in every, like even places like, I mean, these were short asides, but he even talked about the Equality Act, which would extend legal protections to transgender people, and even made a point, said especially transgender young people. Here's a time when DeSantis is trying to talk about the woke agenda in our schools. That's something the Republicans are kind of like to talk about. And Biden's not being sheepish about where the Democratic Party is on the subject. So it's going to put a bigger spring in the Democratic step, I think. Whereas Republicans, they're howling because they didn't get a clear shot at him from this.
I definitely want to talk about DeSantis in a minute, but first, Sarah Huckabee Sanders gave the response. Republicans are praising her speech. Republicans are praising the speech. So it seems like it went better than, say, Bobby Jindal or Marco Rubio's response. It's kind of a thankless job normally. I know she talked about being young. She talked about generational change. She's 40, Biden's 80. She talked about how she's the first woman governor of her state, and Biden, represents a party that can't even tell the difference between women and men, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. So she had some zingers in there. She showed some contrast. I think the one line that I wanted to bring up, she said something to the effect of that the difference these days, the paradigm or the difference these days is not between the left and the right, but between people who are sane and people who are crazy. And that was, I think, a mistake because, Bill, I have to say, even though I am much more close to the Republican Party, philosophically or ideologically on, public policy issues, when it comes to sanity versus craziness, I think Republicans have surpassed the Democrats in recent years on being crazy. I mean, look no further than Marjorie Taylor Greene and Herschel Walker and Carrie Lake and Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and George Santos. So I felt like that was maybe not a smart thing to invoke. What do you think?
Well, especially, she did it live, right? It wasn't pre-recorded.
I don't know. I don't know. It looked like it.
If she
It
did,
looked like it was taped live.
if she did it live, she should have seen what happened on the floor and say, "Hey guys, take out that paragraph. That's not gonna land after what we just saw." Um, but it was pre-recorded. That I feel for her. But yeah,
Well, you know what? I don't know if it was pre-recorded. I do know that they had Republicans released some of her themes, and that there was, scuttlebutt about some of the themes that she was going to hit. So I don't know if it was pre-recorded or not, but definitely, obviously she didn't just wing it. I mean, this was a prepared thing.
I mean, this has been the problem for Republicans since Biden, became the nominee. That Republicans are very committed to defining Democrats by their fringiest voices. AOC, Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, etc. Bernie Sanders to a lesser extent. And Biden makes that hard. Biden was in full blown Scranton mode last night. With the exception of some of the more progressive culture positions that he took, but he touched on kind of briefly. He had that big section about junk fees, about how it's an outrage that they slap on these excessive fees to make you so you can sit with your family on the airline, or when you go to a hotel, or when you change cable TV or cell phone providers. He's talking about America as we're not going to be played for suckers. We're going to take care of this. He does not sound in those moments like a guy who's been a creature of Washington for 40 years. He sounds like a guy sitting on his couch in Scranton, Pennsylvania, or in Delaware. And it's just really hard to paint that guy as being a college professor, a purveyor of critical race theory. It doesn't click.
Yeah, I think vibe is more important than almost anything. I mean, if someone feels like a regular down-home guy or gal, it's really hard to say it's hard to tell everyone that they're dangerous and crazy, even if they are proposing dangerous and crazy things. It's just that dog won't hunt.
It's interesting to me that McCarthy is trying really hard to seem normal. And generally speaking, he comes across as normal. He doesn't. He's certainly said certain things over the years, which I'd say are not so great. But his vibe is a normal vibe. He's trying to present a sober beginning to this negotiation dance. He's trying to put forth some reasonable talking points. They're devoid of specifics, but to say, we should be able to reduce the deficit and move towards a balanced budget. That sounds fine. Nothing sounds weird about that. We should be able to find common ground. That sounds like a normal Biden type thing to say. He probably told his conference ahead of the State of the Union, "Hey, I don't want bad behavior." He's trying to be the school principal.
He reportedly warned them not to jeer and all that. And I mean, who knows what would have happened if he hadn't issued that warning. Bill, I think you're making an interesting point here, which is that all things, there's a huge caveat, but like all things being equal, or things being as they are, like based on all the backstory and the context, Kevin McCarthy's actually doing a pretty good job the last couple of weeks of being the leader. I mean, all things considered. He has come across as, not crazy and fairly likable, and there hasn't been a big revolt. Now, there hasn't been a reason to, but so far so good.
But that's important. I mean, that to the extent I agree with you, it is that he has moved away from the position that supposedly he took to get the gavel. The report was that they agreed that they were going to have a budget resolution that would balance in 10 years, which is the kind of sort of sounds like, well, actually, why 10 years seems like a long time frame, but in reality, it would be very brutal cuts to the point where it's almost mathematically impossible. And especially if you take Social Security Medicare off the table, that becomes really impossible. Like the plan was supposedly budget resolution for a 10-year balanced budget, and then having spending bills that adhere to that resolution and a debt limit plan that roughly adheres to that too. I mean, forgive me. I mean, this wasn't published. It was all handshakes. So forgive me. That's not literally what took place. But at minimum, it sure seemed like that was going to be the negotiating position. 10-year balanced budget. And everything McCarthy has said since then is not that. There's no numbers attached to anything at all. It's moved toward a balanced budget, which is very vague. And I even saw there was a presentation given in the Republican Study Committee, which is a faction, but a majority faction of the Republican Party, that has put forth very dramatic spending cuts in its proposals in the past. But they had a list of debt limit negotiation positions that were also very vague. They didn't have the 10-year time frame on them. So it seems like McCarthy has moved his caucus away from that position without a revolt, without a threat that they're going to move to vacate the speaker. So that is political deafness on his part. And I think it sets up the possibility of a relatively drama-free negotiation where they can agree to some kind of spending cut, but it's not that severe, and so that the Democrats would swallow. But it doesn't touch Social Security. It doesn't, really take a hammer to, anti-poverty funding, for example. Again, I can't know if Biden and McCarthy will actually come to agreement early. But McCarthy said, "I want to come to agreement before the debt limit deadline." I think he means that. I think that's what he would really, really, really like, to not have a lot of debt limit drama that would potentially fracture his caucus and make his job even harder. Like right now, he's kind of got them at bay. So I think he's trying to signal to Biden, "Hey, let's just get this done now before it gets really messy." Look, I can't have no cuts at all. I mean, even the most moderate Republican, Don Bacon, had said, we can't do a discharge position that's unconditional. Don't think you can break us off of the rest of the caucus to get that. We're not going to do that. You got to cut somewhere. So why not get to that place in May instead of September? I mean, I think that's where McCarthy's legitimately at. And, Biden's got to decide, am I going to get there anyway? Let's just do it. Just have a chill summer. Or is he going to say, "Hey, I'm riding high here. These guys don't have their act together. I can play this out. See what I can get out of this." I can't know how Biden's going to react to it, but I think McCarthy has done himself a lot of good playing a weak hand as well as he's played it.
All right, we're going to keep it tight today because I'd like to get this up because it's timely, and also you and I both have stuff to do. But I can't let you go, Bill, until we talk about this kind of developing feud with Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And the latest development, but I don't know if you saw this, but apparently right after Ron DeSantis graduated from some Ivy League school, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, it's unclear to me. I thought it was
a Yale grad or Harvard Law or vice versa.
Right after he graduated, he taught and coached for a year at a high school in the South, maybe Georgia. And there is a photo, apparently, of him drinking with some of the students. It might have been after graduation, but they're at a bar. And by the way, 3 female students and him, as I recall. And this was tweeted, and Donald Trump it wasn't tweeted. It was truthed, maybe.
Is it Donald Trump, social?
Yeah, Donald Trump re-truthed it, or what? I don't even know what the nomenclature here, the lingo is, but Donald Trump clearly suggesting probably more than just underage drinking is my guess. What this is an escalation. I think we could fairly say that Trump has escalated the fight with DeSantis now. What say you?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I remember that story that when it came out, I think last year or 2 years ago, I wasn't aware Trump was pushing it again. Trump is never one for holding back and like biding his time and dropping something late in the game. He just uses everything he has right away, and so you have to worry if you're Trump that you're shooting your shot too soon. But it's never been the way Trump plays the game. He just hammers you repeatedly. And DeSantis so far, who's not a candidate yet, so he hasn't had the pressure to respond in kind right away. Like he wouldn't be able to get away with that as easily if he was actually a candidate. So does that make Trump look weak because he's flailing around and DeSantis is like, yeah, whatever, guy? Or is this giving Trump a head start that he's laying down a negative narrative and he can do so for several weeks and months before DeSantis even shows up? So when DeSantis does
refresh
announce,
my memory, Bill, didn't Donald Trump allege or imply at some point that like Ben Carson was a pedophile or something? I have a weird memory of this. Am I wrong about that?
I remember Trump saying something. I forget what the specific charge was.
There was something to that effect. Now I do remember Trump making fun of like, Dr. Carson claims that he stabbed when he was in high school or in middle school or something. He tried to stab a friend of his and it hit a belt buckle, and Trump mocking that, like that a belt buckle would break a knife. But I feel like Trump made a very loaded charge against Carson that was very intense and something really egregious.
Yeah. Donald Trump goes off on Ben Carson's pathological temper.
Well, it's worse than that, as I recall. Maybe I'm wrong. It's happened.
So a few hours after claiming Republican rival Ben Carson has an incurable, quote, pathological temper, unquote, compared to something else he says is incurable, quote, child molesting, unquote.
Okay.
Trump escalated the battle, devoting over 10 minutes of his rally to attacking Carson's personal narrative. Quote, he wrote a book, and in the book he said terrible things about himself. He says that he's pathological and basically got a pathological disease. I don't want a person that's got a pathological disease. I said, if you're a child molester, a sick puppy, a child molester, there's no cure for that. There's only one cure. We don't want to talk about that cure. That's the ultimate cure. There's death.
So maybe maybe the headline is that Trump compared him to a molester or something. Not something to that effect, as I recall.
Right.
Let me tell you where Democrats have dropped the ball, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick story. I know we're tight on time, but back in like 2012, I was at the Daily Caller, and they were beating the heck out of Mitt Romney because he put Seamus the dog on the roof of his car. Do you remember that story?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Mitt Romney put his dog on the roof of the car. Claims the dog loved it. Who knows? But people love animals.
The dog peed or defecated, on the car and went down the windshield.
Oh, was that the funny story that like tagged Romney or one of the Romneys told?
Right, like what a funny story! I tortured my dog. And he had to go to the bathroom top of the car. Democrats like, you're a weird dude.
They thought this was going to be a charming story about their dad, and it turned out to cause him a lot of trouble because people love dogs, and it felt like a form of abuse to put your dog on the roof of the car. I mean, in a cage, but still. And so Romney really took a lot of grief for weeks, and it was a major narrative in the media and on Twitter. And then my colleague, Jim Treacher at the Daily Caller, somebody put in a comment in one of his blog posts, Obama ate a dog. And it turns out that in one of his like memoirs, Barack Obama talked about eating
my father.
Yeah, he talked about eating dog, and it's like apparently common, right, in certain parts of the world. But anyway, so what happened is every time somebody like Valerie Jarrett or fill in a blank would tweet something or say something about Seamus the dog, I probably never did this, but other people would tweet on top of it, Obama ate a dog. And it really shut down the Seamus narrative that, it basically became anytime someone mentioned Seamus, somebody would say, oh yeah, well, Obama ate a dog. So, and do you remember, now let me bring it forward to the future. Ron DeSantis talks about groomers. Mm-hmm. Why not put that picture over top? Every time Ron DeSantis or one of his minions calls somebody a groomer, you just put that picture over top. I think they missed their moment. Donald Trump would have been on top of that, Bill. Yes or no?
Well, obviously Charlie Crist didn't do that in the gubernatorial race, but it's a thin charge. It seems like he was.
It was a thin charge to say about Ben Carson. I mean, come on. This is
Well,
Donald Trump we're talking about.
Well, Donald Trump has lower standards than Democrats do. Democrats tend not to; they want to have their stuff a little more airtight before going down that path.
Wait. Ron DeSantis is calling people who want to talk about sex in class. Maybe they're a gay teacher who wants to talk about getting married to a partner. I'm willing to believe that maybe that shouldn't be talked about in school, but I wouldn't call that person a groomer. But Ron DeSantis and his team were calling those people groomers. So isn't it then fair to maybe use that picture against Ron DeSantis? I would think that's in the current state of politics in which we live, Bill. If you were a Democrat, hardball political Democratic operative, that might be something that you would do.
I mean, they may do that. I mean, if DeSantis is the nominee in 2024, perhaps they're going to go there. I don't know off the top of my head, like all the circumstances around. I mean, I remember the story. I don't know if the photograph is like rock solid evidence or just insinuates something.
It just insinuates.
Right. But maybe you might well see that become more and more readily used by, if not Democratic politicians, but Democrat friendly, people on Twitter, because Trump will have legitimized it. But DeSantis does, I think, have. I mean, again, I can't know exactly if this is going to make Trump look weak or DeSantis look weak at the end of the day. But I think DeSantis does have to worry a little bit about. I have this sort of golden narrative as better than Trump without the baggage. And Trump's going to be out there pounding me for weeks saying, hey, I do have baggage. I do have things I'm going to have to address in some way. How much does that make Republican? I mean, it's all about the primary right now. How much does it make Republican primary voters pause and think, okay, who is actually the stronger candidate for the general, to the extent that electability is actually what's top of mind for them? Does it get beyond the primary electorate enough to hurt DeSantis in the broader electorate and hurt his trial heat numbers vis-a-vis Biden? If Trump is doing better than DeSantis against Biden early polling, does that make Republican voters think, hey, maybe Trump still got it? I mean, again, Trump was beating Biden by 3 in the last Washington Post ABC poll. So Trump clearly is not lollygagging this. There's always been this sense like, oh, Trump's not really into that. Maybe he'll quit. He's lazy. He doesn't want to be humiliated.
He lollygags the speech.
Yeah.
He lollygags the rally. He's a lollygagger.
But at the end of the day, Trump is the nastiest campaigner perhaps that's ever campaigned. And he's not going to let any possible line of attack, regardless of how tenuous it is, go unused. And
you know how he is. I mean, you could hear him saying, like, look, I don't know, folks, if I was a 28-year-old Ivy League graduate teaching at a girls' school or whatever, I'm not saying anything happened with him and with DeSantis, but I mean, like, Trump has that way of
right.
Yeah.
And it throws off your game. I mean, this is what I mean. And if it's 2015, 2016, I am sympathetic that you weren't prepared for it. I'm sympathetic that Jeb Bush didn't know what to do with low energy. And that Ted Cruz didn't know what to do with your father helped kill JFK. All these weird things. Like, you wouldn't game out.
Yeah. Let's be clear. The odds that Ron DeSantis did something inappropriate are greater than the chance that Rafael Cruz or whatever his name is killed JFK.
Right.
And yet that was a major story for weeks and potentially hurt Ted Cruz.
But Ron DeSantis has never gone through the experience of being attacked by Donald Trump. Few have. And everyone who has had it will say it's very disorienting. I think, John Oliver on HBO talked about how, Trump accused him of, desperately trying to get him to be on the show. And Oliver was like, Did that happen? I didn't think that happened. Did it happen? Let's go check. He was so confused by the attack that it threw him off.
The worst thing is when it happens on a debate stage and he makes assertions. He makes assertions as if they are the gospel truth, and then it is gaslighting. Is exactly what it is.
So it is just a total unknown. It's why you just cannot predict how this Republican primary is going to go. We've never had a former president in a primary. That's unusual. We never had a candidate so as shameless as Trump. We had one. We have seen in 2016. We haven't seen it again. And we have a new crop of candidates who've never dealt with it, and we don't know how well they're going to deal with it.
To be continued. Bill, Scher anything you want to plug?
Well, I wrote about Kevin McCarthy and his debt limit maneuverings for the monthly, Washington Monthly. That went up yesterday. By the time this is posted, I should have my State of the Union take up at the monthly as well. And when I'm done with you, I'm going to be doing the Politics podcast. I've been on that show a few times. So check me out there. That should go up, if not today, later this week.
All right, I'm supposed to talk to Jeffrey Lord of CNN fame, my
Northampton native.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, a former colleague of mine, both no longer with CNN, and I'm also talking to Paul D. Miller, the author of a book called "The Religion of American Greatness," and it's about Christian nationalism, which he opposes. So. Those will be on the Matt Lewis in the News podcast. And Bill, are you? I know you're out. Is it next week that we're skipping, or
it's the week after?
Okay, so you will see us back here in the DMZ for a special Valentine's Day edition next week. Always a pleasure. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Bill Scher. Until then,
take care.